Welcome back to the O Ship Show, where we explore the trials and triumphs of business with those who've lived it. I'm your host, Freddie Laker, and today we're discussing the courage it takes to launch a company and the resilience that it requires to persevere in tough markets like we're in right now. Joining us today is Catherine Dennig, a visionary entrepreneur and co-founder of Fursure, a company revolutionizing pet insurance to support pet parents like me and their vet care needs. Catherine is a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, and she also brings her extensive experience as a former senior product manager at Facebook into the innovative world of pet care. So today we're going to delve into her entrepreneurial journey and uncover some of the valuable insights that she's learned thriving amongst all these challenges. And with that, I welcome you to this week's O Ship. Catherine, welcome to O Ship. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. I love that catchy tune.
It will haunt your dreams tonight. I will warn you in advance.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, the whistle.
I welcome
And
it.
I love the voiceover guy we got to do O Ship. I can listen to that guy's voice all day.
It's a good one.
Exactly. Well, I'm really excited to have you on. You and I got a chance to meet through some other business ventures recently, and I just so enjoyed meeting you. You've got such a great energy about you, and I love the space you're working in. First off, it's a challenge industry and a competitive industry, but you found, I think, a niche in it that I think is easy to love. Obviously, if you're not a pet lover, you're a little on the weird side. So anyone you meet pet lovers, you're a good company. I wanted to take this opportunity to bring you on the show today and really have people hear more about your journey. And the thing that I think is so interesting about where you're at right now as a fellow entrepreneur and a startup guy, it's hard out there right now. This is not like starting a startup 3 years ago. You are very much in the serious trenches right now. And I think a lot of people could benefit from hearing what that's like and how to keep your head on your shoulders. Because, man, it is easy to go off the rails right now.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing me on. I love chatting with you, and I really appreciate you opening with that because I do think like these times, they're not easy. And I think anything that's worthwhile is not easy gotten. And what we have to just remind ourselves is at the end of the day, it's very much a mental game. I think that's the biggest learning that I've taken from just this past year since last summer is really how important managing our own mental psychology is so that we approach every day, every week, every month with clarity of purpose, and we keep our marbles.
Yeah, and that will be the bit that will throw you. Let's get this. We're going to dig into that for sure. I want to help you for sure. Did that almost sound like a pun? Anyway, as soon as I said that, I was like, oh, yeah.
For sure.
Let's have people learn a little bit more about your background. So I know you spent some time over at Facebook. Obviously, it's a very significant company that's had a very significant impact on the world. And they produce a lot of products, and I know are a great, I think, breeding ground for top tier talent. Tell us a little about you leaving Facebook to make a big bet like this. And that's a bold move.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just rewind to back when I was in college and I got my job at Facebook right out of college. And it was the best job that I could have gotten after college. And I wasn't particularly technical. I'd taken a couple of computer science classes. I think they had 1,000 people applied to this rotational product management program, and they only took 12 of us. And I was the only one that didn't major in computer science, I think. And when I joined, I realized how big of a learning opportunity it was. But I always knew that I wanted to work on something that I was really passionate about for the next 10 years. And so I would ask myself after every year, I was like, have I learned the skills that I need to then go off and start something? And I'd started something while in college, and I'll just caveat, I made every mistake in the book, and I really didn't know much of anything at that point. But I tried to solve the problem of where is fun on any given night out? Which of my friends are free without having to send one-off texts? I think 1 million people have tried to solve this problem at this point. And so when I worked at Facebook, I was mainly there for skill building to then start a company after and meeting amazing people who I'd want to work with later. And so after the first year, not ready. Second year, not ready. Third year, when I was at 3.5 years in and I had been moving up, working on newsfeed integrity, which is super topical. It's how do you analyze a piece of content? Is it clickbait? Is it sensational? And then I also worked on the ads teams. I felt like I was leaving on a high note where I could go off and pop my head back up and see what I was passionate about. So I actually quit with no idea and no co-founder.
Wow.
And after people leave, Yeah. I know it's kind of scary to
I
hop
was
on the
not
hamster
expecting that.
wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because I'm just like a full send kind of person where I couldn't like work on something on the side and tinker while still working full time at Facebook. I was like working way harder than maybe I needed to, but I just wanted to learn all the things. And I remember it was like a 3 hour commute, like an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back. And I was doing like 17-hour days and I just needed to pop my head up. So I quit and I told everyone at Facebook, we like write a little badge post and we post it on Facebook when we leave. And I said that I was leaving to start a company, but I didn't know what. And so a few people came out of the woodwork and were like, oh, hey, do you want to work together? And so I tinkered on a few things with a few different potential co-founders, but I realized that none of them were like my person.
Yeah.
And I took like many months off and then started Fursure.
Wow. But I want to make sure I wrap my head around this. So you didn't actually know it was going to be anything to do with what
No.
became Fursure. By the way, worth noting, almost the two of the best companies I've ever started were I quit my job spontaneously and literally started them the next day out of like anger.
Yeah.
So I get it. I'm not going to throw stones at
Yeah.
glass houses. Yeah. This reminds me like when I was a little kid, my parents were like, what do you want to do when you're older? And I used to tell them that I wanted to be a businessman, but I didn't know what that meant. It's like, you're like, I'm going to
Love
start a
that.
company. You're like, but I'm not sure what company. I just know I'm starting a
Yeah.
company. So how did you get to
Yeah.
Fursure?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I quit and I hadn't had time with this commute to meet up with friends who were starting companies, working at cool startups. And so finally, instead of commuting from Northup in San Francisco down to Menlo Park every day, I had all this time to spend how I wanted. I was popping my head up, like chatting with friends who were working at startups, friends who had left Facebook to start companies. And I was just like feasting on all of the knowledge that I was hearing. And the first book I read when I quit was Shoe Dog by Phil Knight from Nike. I was
Yeah,
super
nice.
inspired, like really fast read, PayPal Wars. Like I was just in a very good, inspired headspace. And I just knew that waking up every morning and working on a few of the ideas that I was working on with potential co-founders, it wasn't the right fit co-founder wise, and it wasn't the right fit for what I was passionate for. And I was like, okay, let me just do things that bring me joy. I went shark diving for the first time. I've been obsessed with sharks since I was 4. I went to Fiji and I got hit in the face by a bull shark tail
Oh God.
and just things on my bucket list. And in this state,
Was
I was
well,
like,
just to be
okay,
clear, was the
yeah.
shark diving on the bucket list or getting hit in the face with a shark tail on the bucket list?
Okay, I didn't know that the latter was on there, but it was, and it was the former. I knew I wanted to dive, and then it just so happened my friend captured it on GoPro. And it's amazing.
That's
He's like
awesome. Okay.
chuckling as I get smacked, and I'm like, oh. So I did those things that I knew that for the rest of my life I would not regret having done to take advantage of that time. And I just came back to something that is really core to me as a person. Like ever since I was a really young kid, I've loved like people and I've loved to help people. I've always been really curious to the point where my mom can't ask people how old they are when I was like, hi, how old are you? When I would meet new people. And I've always loved animals. So ever since I was young, I wanted to be like a clinical psychologist because I was like, I could talk to people all day about their problems and help them solve. Like, how amazing would that be? But I think pretty quickly I learned that impact would be capped to like how many patients you can serve at any given time over the length of your career. So I think to some degree I knew that tech was going to be a part of it, even when I was really young, or a marine biologist to swim with sharks all the time. So I knew I loved animals and I'd grown up with pets. And actually, I had a cat named Simba that was like my pride and my joy. I have a dog named Zushi who's asleep next to me right now, who you just met. But Simba was like my soul. Like he had so much personality, and I had him through like middle school, high school, and the first years into adulthood. And my parents had taken care of my other pets, but Simba was like my financial responsibility. And he ended up being diagnosed with something called lymphosarcoma
Mm,
cancer. And treatment was $12,000. And this is when I was
wow.
young. This isn't like when I quit Facebook. This happened like prior.
Okay.
And I just stuffed this memory down. Like I would have gone into debt to pay for his care. Like I didn't know what to do.
I understand. When this stuff happens, you'll spend anything when these situations happen.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
And I felt so guilty and ill equipped because the thought just never crossed my mind that it was like something I should know could happen and that I should be prepared for, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And so, fast forward the years later, I finished college, worked at Facebook. And when I had all this time on my hands, I realized that I wanted another pet. And so I started volunteering at this shelter in the Bay Area called the SFSPCA to just hang out with the cats and the dogs, the senior dogs, and like the
Mhm.
kittens and the puppies. And I was talking to this lady who told me that her dog was running around their backyard like he always does, but this time tore an ACL and treatment was $8,000. And at the
Mhm.
time, granted, it's like the Bay Area is really expensive, but I was flabbergasted at that sum. I was like, how? And she's, oh, thank God I had pet insurance. I was like, what is pet insurance? I'd never heard of it. No one had told me about it back when I had Simba. And so I just do what I normally do, which is go down a rabbit hole because I had the time to. And so I just started digging and reading all the fine print of all the pet insurance companies. I was talking to all my friends who had pets. Do you have pet insurance? They're like, oh no, but should I? And with 2 bits of information, here's what I've learned about what it covers. I think you should get it. 15 of them signed up. So I just became, I don't know if obsessed is the right word, but I just wanted to poke at every like next layer that I found. I just found myself more and more intrigued. And in the meantime, I was talking to my buddy from college who was working at Amazon, and I was throwing ideas at him, and he's like, Kevin, these are all trash. But then this is the first idea that he was like, oh my gosh, there's something here. And so then we started the company.
One of the themes that came in beyond sharks is about people. And you mentioned earlier this concept of finding your person. And so tell me about how you figured out. Again, you were at Facebook, high pedigree place, a bunch of top level folks there. But even with all the kind of great folks that you may have been speaking to there, they were maybe incredibly qualified, I'm sure incredibly impressive backgrounds. How do you know when it's your person as a co-founder and a founder, in your opinion?
Great question. When I left Facebook, a few people reached out. One was an engineer that I'd worked with to build the first clickbait models in Newsfeed to like determine whether a piece of content was clickbait. Super smart engineer. And I still have a great relationship with him. The second was a product designer. And the third was another product designer. And I realized pretty quickly that my skill set, I'm like, if I'm not the CEO, like what would I do? Like I wouldn't be the co-founder and CTO. And I think that was the right combination back then, I even knew, for me moving forward. And so the designers didn't make sense, although we did go deep. And then the engineer, it didn't feel quite right. And the idea that he brought to the table was like a GitHub for science, super cool, but it just wasn't like my passion and purpose in life. And so I was struggling. I didn't know how I was going to find my co-founder. And I chatted with a buddy of mine. His name is Russo Kazi, who I worked at Facebook with. He actually was my first phone interview. And he liked me so much that like I got flown out, like skipped the second interview, but then they had to do it later. And so we just became like really close friends. And he started a company prior to me leaving Facebook to start Fursure called Threads. And I sat in his office and he gave me some great advice, which I've now shared with a bunch of people. He said, okay, to be systematic but also listen to your gut and finding the right co-founder, I have a framework. And this is the framework that I use. The first is values fit. Do we have a fit in values? What are our motivations for starting the company? What lights us up? How did we grow up? What did we like about our parents? And just what things matter to us in this life? What things are we running away from? What bad things have we gone through in the past that have given us the values that we have in this life and the way that we like want to approach our lives? So there needs to be really good alignment there. So that was the first piece. And then the second piece is build fit. If you've never worked with them before, which in a lot of cases we haven't, how do we know whether we can work on a project together? So he gave me those two pieces because he had worked on that to find his co-founders. And so at the time I was talking to Kurji, my co-founder, who we went to Princeton together. He was at Amazon at the time. And I knew that he was super smart as an engineer and I wanted to work with him. And I came to him and I said, hey, let's decide by this date. And I think it was like 4 weeks out or 6 weeks out or something. I said, let's decide by this date if we want to be co-founders or not. Like, we just want to get signal together. This can even be our first project. And if the answer is no, great. If the answer is yes, obviously great. But let's just like align on that. And he said, okay, great. I'm down to do that and down to do the work that it takes to get there. And then we had hours and hours of long conversations at like Red Door Coffee in San Francisco and like Capital One Cafe, which is surprisingly really nice. And just talking about our parents and how we grew up and what matters to us and like how much of our own money we would be willing to put in before we like bring in investor money. Like how big can we see this going? Like just deep questions. And then he took, maybe I shouldn't say this on air, but he like took some sick days and we worked together on hackathon kind of thing to see if we wanted to work together. And then I waited for him for months and then he quit his job. And that was also nerve wracking, but I think that's a good framework.
That's awesome, especially when you're talking about being in the trenches like we've been talking about today. I think having that teammate is everything. So one of the things that's come through is this sense that you didn't have a technical background and that you weren't a programmer, you're not a computer science background. You went wholeheartedly into product management. I talked to a lot of different CEOs and founders on our ship, and some come up through sales, some come through design. But I'm intrigued to find out, how do you feel like your background in product management has effectively impacted your leadership style?
Really good question. The way that I heard PM described before I even took the job was that you're the mini CEO of the team and to lead with what they call servant leadership, where we lead with influence and not authority. So none of the core nucleus of the product team of engineers, data science, product design, content strategy, like the list goes on and on of the different folks that I got to work with, engineering manager, and then all the engineers. None of them reported to me. And so I needed to have a good vision of where to go and what the right strategy would be. Obviously, co-created, bring in a lot of inputs from people above, below, peer, all around, and then rally the team to get the job done. And so I really loved that notion. It takes some foresight, but then also a lot of teamwork and collaboration and like knowing what people's strengths are, knowing what my strengths are, making sure that things don't fall through the cracks. So I took a lot of those skills with me. I really loved and was inspired by Ben Horowitz's Good PM, Bad PM. And I've since shared it with some people who have gone on to be product managers and then also start companies too. And so I think the skill set does lend itself really
I'll have
well.
to check
I
that
think
one out.
yeah, oh, it's a really good one. It's like just very simple and concise. And you're like, yes, wise. And the other thing that came to mind too is I think being a PM, you have to be a PM at a place that knows how to build great product and build products that people want. I think now every which company has product managers and it's like unclear like whether you'd really get good training. I think I got amazing training at Facebook. But then there came a time where being a PM, the incremental learnings that I would get from staying there beyond the 3.5 years felt like a lot of consensus building, maybe some like working within the system, more bigger company stuff that I realized that I just wanted more time to build my 0 to 1 skill set, which is difficult to do like at a massive company, unless you're really high up, in which case it takes years to get there. And so it's what's the ROI of the time spent?
It's interesting to see how you spin the PM, right? A lot of times when I hear PM, I think project management, but absolutely product management in this case, to be clear, how that's shaped the way you think about it. You're in a business that is like any product business where you've got to listen to the needs of your customers. But I feel like this one is particularly interesting place to really make sure that you've got a really great product management background. At the beginning of the show, we talked about one of the big themes that we wanted to come through today was talking about how people deal with pressure. And a bit of insight from me, I swore I'd never get back in the startup game. 2 or 3 months ago, I helped launch another startup with a new first-time CEO. I know it's your second time, but I know he's out there, he's fundraising, he's building a business. And it really brought me back down into reminding what it was like in some of the really earlier years of when every day is a major fight. That doesn't go away, even if certainly like how Chameleon Collective or some of the other businesses I'm involved in are scaled up now, but it's not the same. First off, I'd be interested to see what you feel like you're facing out there in terms of as a startup co-founder and CEO right now. And then following on to that, I'd be interested to hear what you think are some tips you've learned to deal with those pressures.
Amazing question. All your questions are amazing, Freddie.
Yay!
I win.
I think I'm done today.
Okay, so yeah, my job here is done. Okay, so oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to start with the one that I'm facing the most right now, because there have been many in the past, and I'm very excited to share all of the pandemic, the fundraising, all the trials and tribulations that have gotten me to now. But I think the biggest challenge that I'm facing right now is our company is changing the way that pet owners pay for care for their loved one. And the way that it's currently done is people still have to pay upfront and out of pocket for whatever happens to their pet, even if it's $10,000 vet bill. So they're going into debt, they're taking out loans. So the way that things are currently done is not working. Most pet insurance requires you to pay upfront and then submit a claim and get reimbursed down the line of a mystery amount. But we're a new pet insurance company. Most pet owners, if you pluck one on the street, is like not sold yet on the concept of pet insurance. And we make sense in the context of what we do differently, which is direct pay. So you don't have to worry and you don't have to pay the bill up front. We work more like human health, which is more intuitive. And so we have a double hurdle. And then also growing in this market, post D2C, all that stuff, like is not easy. So we need to be very creative about that. And then we're up against like Lemonade, many pets, like large companies with war chest. So the biggest challenge that I'm facing is on growth, because we live or die by our distribution. That's the first most important thing that I'm like thinking about every day. But last maybe a year and a half ago, when I was fundraising in September of 2022, that was another massive challenge. So before growth was worried about fundraising, and I heard from an investor of ours that it was the worst fundraising season in a decade.
Mm.
Holy moly. And yeah, I cried in the shower. Wasn't fun. It was not a good time. But I think so. To answer your question about how I tackle those challenges, that was the question, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's coming back to why I'm doing this. And by the way, that has shifted. I think I've always loved helping people, but I think up until about a year ago, a lot of that was more external recognition focused. I thought, oh, if I raise this next round, everyone will respect me. I'll respect myself. If I get Forbes 30 30, I'll be happy. This next goal and destination, I'll be happy. And I realized that after every next rung, it wasn't like all that fulfilling as much as I thought it was going to be.
Mm.
And so I realized that a lot of my leadership style and the way that I was even coaching myself and frankly, like inner critiquing myself, is that even a word? Inner critiquing was
I'll take it.
very
It's
like,
accepted. I'm going to get
we'll
my
take
Scrabble
it.
book
We'll
out.
allow it. It was very fear based, Freddie. Like
Yeah.
very, ooh, like if you don't do this, then this won't happen. And like scarcity mindset. And you can tell I've done a lot of work on myself, but I do think a lot of it is just in the mind. So then I've transitioned now from fear to love based, where what is actually my purpose? There's a reason why I'm alive right now. There's a reason why we were all born in this era. Like, why are we living now in the 21st century? What gifts and strengths do we have that match with what the world needs? And if we make progress every day toward that, like that can lead to a lot of like fulfillment and joy. And we can embody that and trickle that down to how our teammates show up and the results that we're all achieving together, if that makes sense. And so that piece has really exploded my world in like the best way to help me tackle each of these different pieces. Where I remember before we started the company, a buddy of mine, Keller Ronaldo, who started Zipline, I think they were a Series D company at the time, and they've been crushing it, and the world is like really ready for Zipline in a big way. And he was telling Kurji and me on a phone call, he said, as an entrepreneur, you're going to try 10 things in a day. One of them might work. And then that just compounds over time, and you just keep showing up. And you may get punched in the face metaphorically, or I don't know, metaphorically along the way. But just as long as you are still enjoying yourself. And so I've been checking in with myself. Am I, how's my energy? Am I dreading anything? And so that really helps me through the times where I'm questioning. Because we've been out here for 4.5 years, and I am so pumped for what we're going to accomplish and like the impact that we're having on pets' lives and like literally decreasing suffering for pets and pet owners. And so I think pets bring a lot of love too. So there's a nice fusion of like my purpose.
An interesting component of this you mentioned as you started this story was this, and what I'm about to talk about, I think could be both a positive and a negative, is this concept of milestones. So you have this thing where you're always looking at this thing on the edge of the horizon, this next thing up. And so one part of that can be very motivating because you're like, you fixate on a goal and you're like, okay, instead of trying to figure out how I'm going to run this marathon, I just need to make sure how I get to this next leg. And that seems attainable. And if I go from here to here, and that is a very powerful technique, both for motivating yourself and for motivating your teams. There's another side of this that I think can be really unhealthy. And that's this, sometimes I've heard people refer to it as this concept like St. Elmo's fire, this kind of thing out on the horizon that's out there that you're always chasing. And again, I've experienced this personally where if I did this, then I would feel successful. And then you do this thing and then you're like, maybe I just need to do this next thing and then I'll feel successful. And eventually, sometimes that can feel like it's exiting a company, I think, to a lot of people. That one of the other things I've seen on the flip to that, in the same spirit of this, is some other entrepreneurs I've chatted with over the years, and myself included in this. You can take that step because you think that's what success looks like. What I really enjoyed was actually just running the company, and I didn't need to take that next step because I enjoyed building it and creating it, and then I sold it, and then I was like, no, what am I going to do?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I've heard that too. Yeah.
yeah, there's some real balance of like almost an art form of, again, there's this motivational step out there, which I think can be positive mental health. And then there's this unhealthy, I just have to keep stepping. And I think
Dude,
that's not a natural thing. And when you're an entrepreneur or
good point.
a very high performing business leader, you're so wired to do this all the time. I want to be super clear. Like, I'm sitting here, anyone who's listening to me who doesn't know me well, they're like, That is really insightful, Freddie. That's amazing. Anyone who knows me is, you're insane. I've watched you do this for 20 years. This is the
Oh yeah,
exact thing we tell you to stop doing, and you keep doing it. I don't always practice what I preach here, but I'm trying to be more cognizant of it
I love that.
as I do it. On a funny
I love
note, a
that. That's
quick flashback. There's an early episode of Oh Ship Show with me and another entrepreneur on it called Ben Way. And we would pick an episode subject like 5 minutes before we turn the camera on and just start talking about it. And the subject was about finding work-life balance. And you can actually see in my eyes as we start talking about it, like the existential crisis I have as I'm realizing, what am I doing on show? Because we used to do them all live stream back then too. And I'd be like,
oh
why am
my
I
god.
talking about work-life balance? I'm the worst person at work-life balance ever. But in the
As you're
3 or
working.
4 years since I filmed that, I wanted on record, I am substantially better than those days. So,
Hmm.
yeah, too funny.
Yeah, with the waterfall and the cool thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
I'm
doing
chilling by
it.
the waterfall now. I'm relaxing. So,
Oh yeah, you're so right though. I really loved what you just said about how it can be a mirage. Like fear can be a very motivating
big
factor. Don't
time.
get me wrong. And actually, late last year, I met Dave Cashin, who's this amazing executive coach, and we worked together on the inner game. And there was a group of 22 founders and me, and we all got to learn from him coaching and seeing ourselves in the other person. And he talked about these concepts of how fear is highly motivating, but even more powerful than that is love. But it's like,
You're
what does
here.
that even mean? And then we all have to look inward to figure that out.
I love that. I'm going to
Yeah,
put you on the spot real quick. So
yeah, do it.
you referenced a bunch of really great books from some very clever people that are out there. You're very clear about some of the personality traits that really inspire you. And I loved how you even tapped into that with talking about finding your co-founder. But if you had to single it down to a single personality trait that you think every leader should have, what is that one characteristic basically you think leaders should possess? And whether you have it or not, just generally
Fun though.
something that really inspires you. Yeah.
I love that question. The single most important personality trait, I think, in humans and in leaders is curiosity. And it's what I
Mhm.
admire most in people. It's what I love most about myself and what I love about my dog Sushi. It's why I love sharks too. They're very misunderstood, but they're very curious creatures. Enough about that. But curiosity lends itself to being open-minded, right? Like open-minded to hearing feedback, to iterating, to learning, because we're just curious. Like we're just trying to learn and figure it out, learn about ourselves, learn about the world, learn about something that we're interested in or curious about. And so I think it's the single most important one that then helps all the downstream ones, like adaptability, like being flexible and being resilient, is because we're knowing that we're always changing. And I think that's the most important piece.
I love that. I think it's very much the spirit of a mind of a product manager, by the way. I think great product managers are also curious. Yeah, it makes sense why this is connected here. So I love that. We've covered so much interesting territory today. This is exactly the episode I was hoping to have. So thank you for that. It's been great.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm so glad.
intrigued. What's next for you and what's next for Fursure? Where are you guys going from here?
Okay, so we want to help as many pet owners as possible be the best caretakers of their pets and pay for care without freaking out. Like the biggest hair on fire problem that I see is we love
I'm
our
very
pets more than
sensitive to
anything.
hair on fire comments, by the
Oh,
way, too.
oh my
It's
gosh.
a bit of a
Retract.
yeah, sorry. It's a bit
Rewind.
of a soft spot for me. Yeah. Bold spot. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. You were saying?
The worst problem. Okay. We're going to go with that. And we love our pets, right? Like your pet. Has your pet been on your show? I haven't seen all the
I have
episodes,
not
but
brought Marshmallow Sparkle Princess onto the show yet. I don't think
I
our
think
audience
maybe
is ready.
happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sometime we'll get some feedback, see if we want to give the people what they want. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have a
But
dedicated
so we
episode.
love our pets. Millennials, like we're practicing parenting on our dogs and cats. My dog is my furry child. I spent $1,400 for him to get his teeth cleaned in New York, and I won't even spend that amount on my own teeth. And we're delaying having our own kids because kids are really expensive, human kids. So we're getting pets before we get married, buy our own homes, and have our own kids. But as much as we love our pets, we have no idea how much it costs to take care of them until we're hit with a big bill, which is what happened to me. And I see this time and time again. We're always like, oh, I hope it doesn't happen to me. And then something happens. And it's so traumatizing because what are you going to do? Not pay? And so people are having to make medical decisions based on their finances, like the money that they have in their pocket at the time when the vet's like, hey, can we move forward with this life-saving treatment? You need to put the card down right now. You're like, what do I do? So we're solving that problem. And I want to help as many people as we possibly can in a very competitive market. And so the biggest thing for me is making sure that we're doing everything in our power to make good on that promise. And actually, I'm happy to share like an oh shit moment where
I was gonna ask, but we'll get to that. Yeah,
we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Have you ever read this book, Essentialism?
I've heard of it, but I have not.
This idea that the paradox of success is that it could lead to failure because there's just this proliferation of opportunities, different paths to success. Like you think about if you were in my shoes growing a new pet insurance company, let's acquire pet owners, like you bring them in, solve for their problems of paying for care. And like we have an insurance product and a banking product. So we literally have two solutions, but our banking product is what enables the differentiation for the
Yeah,
insurance product is
yeah.
like you pay for care. So there's so many different paths that we don't actually focus. And so the most important challenge is of all the things that seem worthwhile and worth doing, what's the one that we're going to do right now, get enough information
Mm,
to know whether that was the right strategy, and then move on to the next and then the next and then build
mm,
on that, as opposed to being like sidetracked. Oh my gosh, there's hundreds of
mm.
things and then paralyzed. That's the main focus. It's just I'm living my purpose through Fursure and
Yeah,
feeling
I love
so
that.
much
I love that.
exuberance and
I'm sure it's
excitement.
super
Um,
inspiring for the people that join and work alongside you guys as well. It would not be a ship if
yeah,
I
hit
didn't
me.
get an ask an O ship question. So for those of you who have never watched O ship before, a key part of this show is this idea that we get to talk to lots of different types of inspiring leaders and hear their story. And I think that when a lot of people see successful folks, they assume that everything just magically happens and success appears maybe just through hard work. And if you just work hard enough, you're just smart enough, you just have the right idea, things can happen for you. And the reality is, the path to success is very rarely a straight line. And so, Catherine, what I'd love to hear from you is maybe some story, I don't care what context it is, but maybe some moment where you planned for it to go like this and it went like that and how you dealt with it. And sometimes people deal with things in a way and they say, you know what, this taught me this lesson that changed the way I do business. Sometimes people say, I did this and this is how I dealt with that adversity, but we got it back on track. And sometimes people just tell me these stories. They go, like, this blew up in my face. I'm not sure I had a solution. It wasn't very funny at the time, but it's pretty damn funny in hindsight. And those are okay too. So the floor is yours. There are no rules on your O ship story, but I look forward to hearing it. So over to you, my friend.
Amazing tee up. I love that. At first, I was going to tell a story that happened recently, but now that I've heard that prompt, the biggest, most classic example, I have many of these stories, right? It's not a straight line. Also, no one's path is linear too, but I just think in my journey as a as a founder, there has been lots of metaphorical punches to the face. You just got to keep going. But the one example that like really stands out is when we first started the company we incorporated the end of 2019 and we like hit the ground running in 2020 of January or February of 2020. And like the first check in our company is a guy that I started at Facebook on the same day with, who was like a successful founder, Hunter Horsley, great guy. And he's like, yeah, I think if you put together a deck and go out and try to raise some seed money, like you'll be fine. Okay, put together a deck. I have this big pet market. I have this idea, this great team, and we go out and I have all these like back to back pitch meetings. And the very first day on Monday morning, where we have a meeting with the first VC, shelter in place was announced in San Francisco. Everything was going to be on lockdown. We could not leave our homes. And so like everyone's getting messages. All these investors are like, okay, I don't know what you're saying, but like we're busy. And all these like portfolio founders are seeing their numbers like go down like pretty quickly over the course of that week. And so all these investors, okay, first and foremost, like you have an idea, like you don't have any traction. Like, no, we're not going to give you $2 million. And then also they're handling their portfolio companies disaster situation where they're growing, product market fit, but then they're seeing all their revenues like dramatically. And so I'm the type of person that when I have a goal, like nothing can stop me. And I'm just like, let me just stay on this path. I think it's because I identify that way too. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to keep banging out these meetings and having so many of them where they're just like, yeah, no, like this is irrelevant. Like move on. Like we're really busy with other things, but they're still taking the meetings. So I had so many conversations. And then finally I was like, okay, this is not going to work. We're going to do a friends and family round, and we're actually going to just start proving what I have in store for this business. My co-founder and I had an idea for what we wanted to see. We had some initial like inklings, like 10 of our friends, oh, let me just productize the solution, but let's actually get some traction. And so I stopped that. where we raised the friends and family, which thankfully in March, April of 2020, when in the thick of the storm, we're still able to pull this off because I think I had just
Amazing.
worked really hard and people were like, okay, yeah, like whatever she works on,
Yeah.
maybe you can have a shot.
I have,
But so that, and then it worked out well. Like we were able to raise like a year later. But I think that was really humbling. We're in Silicon Valley. We had these great, but no, it's a nice big
I have
slap on the face and we needed it.
I never thought about this for you before, but so first off, the timing of the fundraise is crazy hard. But pets blew up during the pandemic, right? So
Oh
did that
yeah,
help you
big
guys?
time.
Where people were like, there was like a massive pet surge. That was
Yeah.
probably big for you guys, I'm guessing.
Yes. So after we had worked on the company for about a year, the pet space was booming. Everyone and their mother decided to get a pet because people who wanted to have a pet finally had the time to do so because
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
at
yeah.
home all the
Sure.
time. And so all the shelters were clearing out. Yeah, just massive adoption and more things happening in that space. And so more investors are curious about it. And so in 2021, so a year later, when we had great traction, we were able to get this like really oversubscribed seed round because also the markets were frothy too. So 2021 around April. And so that worked in our favor ultimately. I think with entrepreneurship too, and I've heard this analogy told time and time again, it's like we're surfers. There's a wave that's already existing that we noticed and we picked a timing to go. Whether it's the right timing or not, time will tell.
Mhm.
But the wave was definitely happening. And so that helped us for sure.
That's wild. I'm glad you survived it through that and I got to hear that story. I would love to make sure that people can find you. If people want to learn more about you, learn more about your company, what's the best way for them to do that?
Check our website out at getfursure.com. So GETFURSURE for sure. And then hit me up on LinkedIn. I would love to hear how you found this and if this was helpful in some way and would
That's
love to
very
be
kind of you.
helpful.
Thanks, Katrin. Again, you're super easy to chat with, and I know if anyone reaches out, I know you'll give them a quick note back. So thank you for that. I just want to say thanks again for everyone who's tuned in today. By the way, we love bringing our ship to you every week. This is something that I'm very passionate about. I find it very energizing. I hope you find it very energizing. The best thing you can do to support the show is tell your friends, like an episode, share an episode, comment, any of those things help the algorithm that helps spread the message out there more and more. Whether you're listening or watching on video like YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, or you're listening on any of the audio places that we stream like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we thank you for tuning in. We're glad you're here every week, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week on No Ship. And Katrin, thank you again for tuning in today and joining us today. It was just great to spend some time with you, and I look forward to getting to know you better.
Thanks so much, Freddie. You rock. Can't wait
All right.
either.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you
Bye.
next week.